I was going through my MBA at the same time, and performance review time came around, and I thought for sure this is the year I'm going to get that top achiever. I didn't. I got the mediocre rating, the same one 80% of the people do, and I was crushed. I was like so upset. And once I got my emotions in check, I said to my boss, what happened? And he said, Cheryl, I don't mean to offend you, but you remind me of Broomhilda. If I don't know if listeners will know who Broomhilda is, but this cartoon character. And he's like, you're on this broom, got your bobby pins are flying out of your hair, and you're kicking up dust all over. And he's like, you are working on things I don't care about. And it was like,
Oh,
whoa. It was like, ugh. But he was right. It was right. He was right. I was working on anything anybody asked me to do, but it wasn't what my boss needed.
how did you go from washing dishes in the basement of Ford's world headquarters to becoming inducted into the Women in Manufacturing Hall of Fame? My guest did exactly that. And today, she's going to show you how to stop waiting to be noticed, how to say no without guilt, and how to use AI as the single biggest career differentiator women have this decade. Welcome to No Woman Left Behind. I am Rosie Zilinskas, creator of the Articulation Gap Framework for Workplace Communication and Leadership Visibility. Let me introduce you to this amazing leader. Cheryl Thompson started her career on the floor at Ford and worked her way up through a tool and die apprenticeship. And she went from there into engineering and global manufacturing leadership at Ford and American Axle and Manufacturing. She spent 8 years running CADIA, an industry organization serving more than 70 manufacturers, before turning her full attention to AI. Today, she helps manufacturing leaders and their teams build practical AI capability using their own work, so the skills and tools stay inside the company long after she leaves. She's an operator first, not a technologist, which is exactly why the work sticks. I am so excited to have you hear Cheryl's story and some pivotal things that I promise you are going to be transformational. So stay tuned for this conversation. Cheryl, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm doing great, Rosie. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. So, first of all, I wanted to acknowledge that you were inducted into the Women in Manufacturing Hall of Fame. Congratulations. Your career, your background is in the automotive industry, and we're going to have a fantastic conversation on number one, how to differentiate yourself, not just in your career, but in an industry that is largely male dominated the way the automotive industry is. And we're just going to have a great conversation. We're going to talk about some ways that women can really use the tools that are out these days, such as AI, to really differentiate themselves. So with that, I'd kind of like to start a little bit with your story. You were in the automotive industry. How did you start there? What is your background? And what was that one moment that you were like, oh, you know what? I want to step into leadership. Let's start there.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've been in the industry for about 40 years. I mean, time is just flying by. And
Yeah.
I did not really choose to go into the auto industry. It chose me. In fact, I recently found out I'm fourth generation auto worker. So my great
Oh,
grandfather, yeah, we found his draft card, and he was a punch press operator at Ford Motor Company in like 1913.
wow.
My grandfather was a pipe fitter in the auto industry, and then my dad was an engineer at Ford. So when I was growing up, it was, in the 70s, it was a very rough and tough industry, a lot of toxicity. And he would just come home and just talk about how much he hated his job. So I wanted nothing to do with automotive, right? So I was planning on going into something with computers. And, it was in the mid 80s. And I ended up getting pregnant at 17. And I was waitressing. And my dad was like, "Hey, Cheryl, if you're going to waitress, why not try to get in at Ford Motor Company?" At that time, their food service was internal. So my mom drove me there. And, I'm like 19 at the time. I've got a 1 year old, 1.5 year old. And I go and apply, and they hired me on the spot. Like they
Mm.
handed me an apron and said, "Can you start right now?" So my first job was washing dishes in the basement of World Headquarters. And then they were looking to get more women and minorities into the skilled trades. So this was about 2 years in. And I raised my hand because I knew I was going to be making a whole lot more money. It was just a great career path. So I did a tool and die apprenticeship, which was 4 years. I was a journeywoman for a couple of years after that. And I had a superintendent who came alongside of me and said, "Hey, listen, kid, you don't want to be wrenching on tools your entire career. Have you thought about going into engineering?" And when I think back about him, he was a sponsor, right? He was,
Yes.
introduced me to the idea I could be an engineer. He introduced me to his network, right? He put his name next to mine, like I'm vouching for her. So that's how
Mm.
I got into engineering. So my career was in the vehicle side, powertrain side, in manufacturing engineering. And then I would say, 31 years into it, I just had this invisible force pulling me out. Like I knew the experience I had as one of the very, very few women in many rooms and on the plant floor. And I started my company, CADIA, which is Center for Automotive Diversity, Inclusion, and Advancement. We rebranded due to current times.
Yeah.
But really, the idea was I knew I had so much more to give, and I was overlooked, undervalued, underestimated, all the stuff. And I knew that there were other women and others who were underrepresented that were in the same boat. And I just knew that if we unlocked that, we could really improve the industry. In Cadia is, if you look it up, it's an underground gold mine in Australia. And so I think
Mm.
it's a gold mine for employers to think about tapping into the assets, which is talent they already have. And it's a gold mine for people who may not know the industry is very interesting. It's lucrative. And, we're just in front of so much change right now.
That's amazing. And kudos to that sponsor, that
I know.
recognized your
Yeah.
potential because, you think about it, like, where would you be if you hadn't, had someone be like, "Hey, girl, you have potential," So
Absolutely.
talk to me a little bit about how you said you were overlooked. You were,
Mhm.
obviously underrepresented because there were not many women. Were there other women in that same type of role as you had at that time?
In tool and die, not very many, but there's one. She was probably 15 years my senior, and she was so instrumental in helping me. Like she was telling me, I was one of the very few women in this big, scary manufacturing plant. I had never been in a factory before. And
Mm.
she looked out for me and she said, "Listen, I know you're scared, but you need to be approachable." And she had just gone through Dale Carnegie training. So
Oh,
she had this big
yeah.
smile on her face all the time. And she taught me how to be approachable, how to present myself. And we had lost touch and we just reconnected a couple of years ago after losing touch for 30 years. And
Mm.
she was so touched to find out that I consider her a mentor. So
Oh,
she was one. When I got into engineering, not very many women. I remember one woman came alongside me and said, "Hey, if you don't have thick skin, you better get thick skin. You're going to need it." Right. And that was kind of the support I got. It was not very nurturing. It was just
right.
like, "Hey, suck it up, buttercup. This is a tough environment and you got to suit up."
Right. And then
But
so you went
then,
to you went to school for engineering then, and
no, not engineering. So my background in skill trades, the tool and die, prepared me to be an engineer. So I got
oh,
my
got it.
degree just in manufacturing,
Okay.
and then went on to get my MBA.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
And when you were going through school, were you still working full time then?
Hmm. Yep.
Oh, wow. Gosh, that's even more impressive, Cheryl.
Oh, it was funny,
And with a child too.
with a child, because the apprenticeship, I had to go to college courses. And I can remember, having my drafting board. This is back in the days before CAD. I had my
Yeah.
drafting board, and, my son's playing with all his toys. I would take him to Chuck E. Cheese to go play so I could do my homework. I mean, so yeah, he was
Oh
with me the
gosh.
whole way through all of my education, which was all while working full time.
Yeah, wow, that's really impressive. Now, when you graduated and you knew that you were gonna, stick around in the automotive industry, what kind of led you to be an advocate? Because obviously you now have your own company for,
Yeah.
again, women, advocating for women. But what was that moment that you were like, you know what? People looked out for me. I want to start, giving back to others. So what was that like?
Yeah. So, eventually I became a supervisor in engineering, and I had engineers working for me. And I kind of got stuck there for like 10 years because I didn't see any other female managers, beyond that supervisory position. And I just thought it wasn't possible. And
Mm.
then I ended up running across a mentor, another female. And oh, I know what this is what happened. I remember I was having a career discussion with my boss, and he turned in to be a sponsor as well. And he was saying, we need to get you ready for the next level. I think you're ready for a manager position. And I said, I don't see any role models that I identify with. And he looked at me like I was nuts. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about, but we'll try to get you some help. So he hooked me up with a sponsor. Her name was Linda. She was manufacturing engineering vice president. And I'm waiting outside of her office to talk to her. And I could hear her on the phone saying, we need to get these engineers home from launch. They've been away from their families for 6 months. And it was like, wow, like that's how I would be if I was in that position, because I knew how stressful it was to families to be traveling. So Linda was her name. She just gave me some tough love and, told me, this is how you have to position yourself as a woman. This is how the guys do it. You need to be more strategic. And so that was really helpful. And then so eventually I did get that manager position. And I remember sitting in the room in one of my first meetings, and I'm looking around at all the other managers thinking, oh my gosh, I thought y'all had it all figured out. Like they didn't either. So
Yes,
that is when I realized I had just been holding myself back. It was my own self doubt getting in the way. And it was just like this big aha. And I just wanted other women to know that, hey, don't sell yourself short. You have something to give. You need to be in that room too. We need to hear your voice.
absolutely. And part of what I do with No Woman Left Behind is I see, and I was in the corporate world for 32 years, and I would see
Mm,
women work really hard. They're doing the work,
yes.
but they were not necessarily able to articulate how they were bringing value to the organization. And
Oh,
that's kind of
Rosie.
what I really am passionate about because
Yes.
my story was I held myself back. I was, 40 and I'm literally typing in my desk. I'm thinking, okay, any day now someone's going to notice my hard work. And obviously no one ever came. And it wasn't until I said something and, things started happening. So obviously you being in a room with a lot of other male managers and female managers as well, and you said that your sponsor, Linda, said, this is the way men do it. And that's kind of one of the crucial questions that I want to ask. What are men doing in their careers that women are not doing?
Yeah, well, so many things. They're advocating for themselves. They are getting that exposure and visibility. They're not just sitting there at their computer typing, waiting for someone to notice them, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And the other big thing I think is we as women have a tendency to people please. We
Yes.
want to help everybody. So I can think back to a time in my career where I was doing two jobs. I was the gauging supervisor. They had also asked me to take on the quality supervisory role. So I was doing that. We were in the middle of hiring a bunch of engineers, and I helped somebody write a job description. And I remember that boss that I had said, don't touch it. Don't touch it. If you touch it, you're going to own it. And I was like, but I want to help. So I was doing all that. I was going through my MBA at the same time. And performance review time came around, and I thought, for sure, this is the year I'm going to get that top achiever. I didn't. I got the mediocre rating, the same one 80% of the people do. And I was crushed. I was like so upset. And once I got my emotions in check, I said to my boss, what happened? And he said, Cheryl, I don't mean to offend you, but you remind me of Broomhilda. If I don't know if listeners will know who Broomhilda is, but this cartoon character, and he's like, you're on this broom, you've got your bobby pins are flying out of your hair, and you're kicking up dust all over, and he's like, you are working on things I don't care about. And it was like,
Oh.
whoa. It was like, ugh. But it was right. It was right. He was right. I was working on anything anybody asked me to do, but it wasn't what my boss needed. And he gave me examples of, so and so is working on this, this, and this that I care about. They're the hot buttons of the organization. That was the biggest learning I had. It just made me stop people pleasing, stop saying yes to all of these requests that were somebody else's job that they could figure out on their own, and really just figure out what are the organization's hot buttons, what is going to get me noticed, putting myself out there, getting more exposure. So
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the big things.
That is so pivotal. So let me ask you this. When someone would come to you and say, hey, Cheryl, can you work on this project? And you already had that conversation with your boss and you were like, nope, not going to do it. So many women, again, the people pleasers, you're afraid to say something. So what was your statement that you would say to someone saying, nope, sorry, can't help you with that?
Well, it just depended on the situation, but I would let them know whose responsibility it was to do that, not mine. Or if it was taking notes in a meeting, I would say, hey, I've been doing that for a while. I think it's someone else's turn right now. Or if help was available online, I would refer them to here's where you can figure that out. So it was no. And maybe here's why I've got this and this and this going on, or here's another way to get that help. But
Yeah.
it's a muscle. You have to practice. It takes time. But then I would also think about that person. Would they help me? Probably not. So that was the other mindset shift that I had to do, is like, just think about, hey, they're looking out for themselves. I need to be looking out for myself as well. No one's going to look out for you as much as you're going to look out for yourself.
Exactly. Especially when you got that clarity. And that's another piece, that you got that clarity of, I'm doing all these things, but none of it is what is important to my boss or the team or what,
Yeah.
my role. So I think that's like such a fantastic lesson for everybody that's listening, because again, we're here so that other women that are coming up behind us can learn from our mistakes, from our,
Right.
experiences, because it's so important. So I want to pivot a little bit to why you then got out of the corporate world and started CADIA. I know you and I had a brief conversation in December, and you started using AI in a very strategic way. Please share with the audience what you're doing, because obviously AI is all the rage right now. And one of the things I am a career strategist, and the biggest issue that I see people is that, number one, they spend so much time working on the resume that they don't prepare for the interview. So that's one thing. But the big thing about the resume is they have no metrics. And I was actually just at a career fair last week, and I talked to a woman and she showed me her resume and there were no metrics. And I said, you need metrics in here. And she's like, well, the company didn't allow us to keep metrics. I said, that's okay if the company didn't allow it, but you are able to incorporate metrics based on the work that you did, based on your knowledge, your experience, your expertise, and do it with integrity, as long as you can explain where those numbers are coming from. So I know that you did a workshop in December, and so tell us a little bit about what that workshop was about and what was the purpose of you creating that workshop.
Yeah, well, first of all, I got into AI in April. I was listening to a podcast, a woman talking about how she was using AI, and it really caught my attention. I attended her free boot camp, and I ended up in this 12-week course, which now, I'm still involved in. I've taken it twice now. And there's like a mastermind that I'm a part of. So I'm
Mhm.
continuing to learn. I've probably got 1,200 hours in training
Wow.
and building things. Yeah. So, I think back to where diversity, equity, and inclusion is, right? We're having a moment.
Mhm.
And, I still think it comes back to the individual. How do we help individuals empower themselves? And so when the workshop that I was talking about was focused on just that. How do we help women advocate for themselves? How do we help them really have that agency in
Mhm.
their career? So some of the things that we taught in that workshop was, a lot of us will say, oh, I'm not sure what my next move is, and we'll give our power to someone else and say, what do you think I'd be good at? So I created a prompt to help them explore other career opportunities. So they can upload their resume in there. They can have ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, whichever one you like, interview you, based on your experience, and have it suggest some good next steps for you. Here are some positions that you'd be great for. And then based on that, who are some people I should talk to, and do an informational interview with? So that's one tool that we taught. Another one was keeping on top of industry trends. There's so much going on right now, so much change with technology in the automotive industry, right? We have tariffs going on. If you're keeping on top of AI, you can run a prompt and you can run that every week and say, hey, help me stay on top of the top industry trends. Give me a report, right? And you can automate that prompt and have it run every week, every month. So that helps you, I always say we have to help each other learn faster than the pace of change. So it's like a learning accelerator. It keeps you on top of all of the technology changes, and it will break it down for you in a way that is understandable. As an engineer, I wasn't very technical. I was more on the people side. Um, but I would have loved to have a tool back then that would help me understand something very technical in a way I could understand it. And then we created a custom GPT that was a leadership communication coach. So if you have to have a tough discussion with somebody, if you're having a conflict with somebody at work, what if somebody keeps overstepping their line, your boundaries, and you've had that conversation? How do you maybe even role play a conversation with someone? So, there's so many cool things you can do with AI. I use it in my business all day long. I have in Claude, I have a marketing assistant, I have a sales assistant, I have a CFO. Right, I have my P&L in there, and my money story, my mindset, and I have it coach me on my roadmap, 1 to 3 to 5 years from now. Where do I want to be? And if I think about AI, I think it's one of the biggest career differentiators we all have, right, in this decade, in our lifetimes, because it can help you do so much. It can help you learn. It can help you position yourself. It can help you overcome a problem. So I just think the opportunities are limitless.
I love all of that. And it's so interesting because I do a lot of career coaching through libraries, and
Yeah.
9 out of 10 people that are coming through and doing coaching, and it's just private coaching, they're not familiar with AI. I mean, they know about it. Everybody knows about it now, but they're
Yeah.
like, oh, I've never used it. And so I do
Hmm.
kind of like a, 30-minute run through of like all the things that you can do. But I'm still so surprised that many, just everyday people are not necessarily using AI. So I've started talking to my sisters and stuff about AI and all the stuff. Like my husband is now, using it, but it is, like you said, limitless. And as long as you are able to organize yourself, and I just spent a couple hundred hours like in December doing the same thing, like working through my business and looking at all the projections and all that stuff. So there is
Hmm.
no one right thing to do, or to work in with AI. But specifically for women in, those metrics, how was it your custom GPT that helped with that, or what portion of your workshop helped them figure out metrics?
Well, we've done a couple of different workshops. So the one I was talking about was most recent, but there was one we did at the end of the year, and this was more for corporate people. And to the metrics point, we helped them prepare for their year-end performance review. At the end of
Oh,
the year, you're often asked, what were your contributions? And many times we don't include the metrics. It's like, I did
mhm.
this, I did that, or we have a hard time even remembering what we did. So many people have Copilot in the workplace. And if you have a license, you're able to have it look at your emails. So it's like, hey, look back at my last year of emails and pull out the things that were significant that I achieved. And then from there, we gave them a prompt to help organize it into the metrics. What's better because of me? The situation, the task, the action, and the result. And so
Yeah.
then you present it in that way that shows this is what's better because of me with metrics. And then thinking about setting your goals for next year, helping you put that into a SMART goal format. So here's the things that I want to work on next year. And then, organizing in that SMART format way just really goes a long way, and align with the organization's goals as well. And then also personal development goals, having AI interview you on where maybe you can make some improvements, like Gemini. Gemini is just coming out with so many cool tools. So you can go into Gemini and then go into Canvas. There's a little plus button that allows you to go into Canvas, and you can say, hey, create me a self-assessment that will assess my readiness for advancement.
Mm,
And I just did that this morning. I got a 20 question assessment, and then based on that, now I can figure out what my development goals are. What do I need to work on next? Right. I'm still working on improving
sure.
myself.
Yeah.
Right. It's like this spiral. It's like you think you've got something figured out and it comes up again. For me, it's the worthiness thing. I still overwork, overgive. I just think that's how I grew up. First, oldest child, over responsibility. And so that people pleasing thing still comes up. And, I went into burnout a couple of years ago because I was overgiving. So it's like
Mhm.
there's always something that we need to learn. So AI can be just a great coach to help walk you through what your challenge is. And, just a tip here is prompting format. You probably know about this, but RCRQ. So what's the role? What's the persona? Who do you want AI to be? So one of my favorite ones is you are Mel Robbins or you are Brene Brown, right? And then you give it the context. Hey, I'm really struggling with my confidence. It's like I feel so prepared, but then when I get in the room, I lose my words. Like AI needs to know, how are you feeling? What's the pain? What's the problem? So it needs the context. And then you give it the request. Like, help me create a 6-month development plan that's going to help me improve my confidence and give me specific challenges that I can do every month that's going to help me strengthen that muscle. And then the last one, Q, is please ask me any clarifying questions. So AI needs to know as much about you to give the very best answer.
I love all that. And it's so interesting that you were saying, you're constantly in that learning mode. I think all
Yeah.
entrepreneurs are constantly in learning modes, but also corporate people. And so I'm a certified story brand consultant guide. And
Oh.
one of the things that we always say is like, do not laminate anything because as you grow and evolve, everything that you're doing is growing and evolving. So something that I, created 2 years ago, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I was using that, as a lead magnet or whatever. But,
Yeah.
a lot of us entrepreneurs specifically, we have that love of learning. And a lot of
Yeah.
corporate women have that love of learning too, but then they're kind of stuck. Almost kind of like that example that you said is like, well, I don't see, people like myself, as managers, and other men are like, what are you talking about? So I love that you're in that constant learning, and all of the tools that you talked about with AI are fantastic. So I also use AI all day, every day, and I have started using Grok for research because Grok is
Yes.
amazing at research. And it's kind of funny because I was a chat GPT girl, and over the last like 2 or 3 months, I have fallen in love with Claude because I use
Yes.
ChatGPT to kind of start a project, and then when I throw it into Claude, it like makes it more realistic and more organic to people, where the language is just more people oriented instead of like strategy and projects. So it is
Yeah, Claude's a
amazing.
better writer.
Yes, it is amazing how much more just authentic the output that
Yeah.
Claude gives me. So I absolutely
Yeah.
love that.
Grok is great for getting into like social media, Reddit, and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. But I just found out Perplexity
Mm-hmm.
allows you to turn off the web and turn on social media. So I'm
Oh.
doing, yeah, this is really cool. So I'm doing these learning labs throughout the year in automotive, trying to access or give people relatable use cases for every different functional area. So someone in quality, someone in operations, someone in a dealership, somebody that's a leader, somebody that is an engineer, communications, marketing, whatever. And so I put in my learning lab topics into Perplexity. I turned off the web, turned on social media, and I said, what are the top pain points people are talking about in
Ooh.
automotive and AI education? And it gave me the top pain points, ways to address them. I mean, the use cases are just endless, Rosie.
That is so good. I love it. And I think this conversation today is just so important for women to know that there are tools out there. And again, I'm a career coach and people pay a lot of money for coaching or for resume writing. And
Mm-hmm.
actually I'm going to take that back, because with resume writing, it's the only thing that I constantly tell people, listen, if you can, scrape, $500-600 to have somebody write you a resume, have a professional do that, because it is so hard for you to pull out all those like golden nuggets, those stories, how you actually contribute. And then you can use AI for like the interview coaching and all that other stuff. But I think that's the one thing. And I am not a resume writer, but it a professional resume writer can make you look like a rock star. And then it's up to you to tweak your resume and, update it for all the different jobs. But it is incredible once you start using AI and you can see the potential. And like you said, all the learning labs, where are you taking the learning labs through?
We're leading these learning labs.
Okay, you're okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep. And then I'm taking my AI training through a company called the Uncommon Leaders.
Okay.
And there's a course called Automate to Accelerate. So that's where I've done my training. But we're bringing AI learning to the automotive industry
Got
by
it.
functional area. So
I love that. Now,
yeah.
as far as the automotive industry, what
Mhm.
trends can you share about women in the automotive industry these days?
Yeah, we did a demographic study back in 2023. And I really wanted to know by leadership level and by functional area, how are women doing? And I was pleased to say, to find out that we're doing much better than we were doing. Representation in senior leadership positions is really on par with overall representation in automotive. It's like, around 30%. On the high side overall, but 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was much lower. It was probably 10 to 15%. So we are definitely making progress, and the bright spot is when I look at senior leaders and executive leaders, that is carrying through. We still have that representation. And when I go to conferences like women in manufacturing, or women in automotive, or with automotive news leading women, I'm seeing it physically in the room. So we're seeing more people like us in leadership. And, I think that is just allowing us to continue. I do worry about, the return to the office mandates. And sometimes there are strict mandates out there, and it does really make it difficult for women who are trying to balance and juggle multiple kids and parents and all the things. So I just hope that that pendulum swings back a little bit and we get more into flexibility and what women need. There was the Women in the Workplace Lean In study that's published every year, and so it was published in 2025, and all of the scuttle on social media was, oh, there's this ambition gap. And so there were some reports that said women aren't as ambitious as men. But when you look at the study, it did say women are just reading the room. There's less support for women now than there was 2-3 years ago, right? It's just the political environment that we're in. People are really afraid to have women led, initiatives. And so women are just like, hey, if I'm not going to get the support, I'm just going to have to focus on, family, personal life right now. But when women are given that support, their ambition is on par with men. So the International Women's Day theme this year is Give to Gain. I don't like that because I think women give enough. We're
Yes.
kind of flipping the whole thing to say, what can companies gain when they give women support? So, I think that we've made some progress. I just don't want to lose that progress. And I'm seeing women in more technical roles. AI is very accessible right now, so I think that's attracting more women to these technical roles. I'm seeing more women in profit and loss roles, which I think leads to advancement. So I'm seeing less women in the administrative or support roles than I had in the past.
So, and you touched on that word, the diversity word that, made a plane crash or whatever, whatever craziness was with that. But how are you addressing that now? Because like you
Mhm.
said, now it's almost like using the word diversity is taboo because nobody wants to talk about diversity. However, we still have diverse people, men, women, all the, different um, races, whatever, so how did you pivot from that diversity to what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so diversity and equity and inclusion is still something that we do. We work with many of the OEMs and tier one suppliers, and we've been together through this last year, learning what each other are doing. Many people are rebranding. So the work doesn't change. It doesn't matter what we call it. The work is still the work, right? So people are continuing to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to succeed, to thrive, to shine. That's largely done through employee resource groups. That's a big driver right now. So one of my goals is to make sure these employee resource group leaders are supported. It's a volunteer role for them. And so, we did a 10-week course that incorporated AI into all of the tasks that they have to do as an employee resource group leader. We're making sure that talent leaders, HR leaders are supported. So, we have this peer community, so everyone understands what everyone else is doing, and there's community that they can call each other if they have a challenge or a problem. Everyone's making sure that they don't have programs that are solely focused on one demographic, right? Just to keep out of any legal trouble or perceived disadvantages for some. But then we're doubling down and saying, okay, in addition to traditional DEI frameworks, we're also making sure no one is left behind in AI, right?
Yeah.
65% of women hide their AI usage. And so that should not be the case. In fact, that lean in study that I talked about, there's something in there about men are more likely to be encouraged by their bosses to use AI than women. So no one left behind in AI. It's very accessible. We want to teach people how. And then working on cultural transformation. So the culture has to be right for organizations to be able to learn faster than the pace of change using AI. So that psychological safety is very important. So talking about culture. And then the third thing is sustainable leadership. Leaders are tired right now. They're burnt
Yes.
out. There's so much we're all carrying emotionally with everything going on in our world right now. Automotive companies in particular are facing a lot of reductions and challenges with tariffs and strategy. Are we going EV or not? Right. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. So, how do we make sure that people are supported at work? So, teaching about self care and then just helping leaders be better leaders. So
Yeah, I
that's what
love
we're
that,
doing.
Cheryl. Oh my gosh. Everything that you shared is just so instrumental. And it's not hard. Everything that we talked about, it's not hard, but you do have to be on this is my word for this year is just be intentional. Because a lot of women we're people pleasers, we're caregivers, and I'm kind of I mentioned to you I'm going through a hard season right now with my parents. They're both very ill and we're
Hmm.
trying to figure all that out. And so it's so interesting because we're giving, and we're the last ones that we do like self-care for ourselves, but also our careers. So our careers are just kind of left on autopilot. And then you and I love this phrase of like, if you don't tell someone what you want, they tell you what you want.
Yes,
And that
yes.
is so instrumental. So, and that's kind of why I do all the work that I do, being no woman left behind. So I love that, you're saying, no one left behind for AI,
I
but,
know.
it is so instrumental. And I have a membership and I do like teaching, but I do an implementation hour a month. And it's like, at least it's 12 hours a month that you work on your career. If you have no other time, because that's what the members say, it's like, Rosie, I have no time. I'm like, okay, great.
Yes.
This is what we're going to do. 1 hour implementation. So we all get on and it's heads down and we're all working on our own thing, but you have a plan. You have, something to work on. And again, with everything that you shared with the workshops that you're doing, there is a method, a strategy that you can follow so that you can start improving and advancing your career. And it may not be immediate, like that you have an immediate result, but every little bit helps when you start working and start preparing yourself. And we all know that adaptability is going to be the number one skill that employers are looking for, because with AI, we're going to have to shift, and it changes every single day.
That's
It's
right.
constantly changing, but I love it. I mean, I think I can't even remember working. It's kind of like when you have kids, you don't remember life before kids. It's the
Right,
same thing. It's
right.
like, I don't remember how I did all this stuff before AI. So I love it. But Cheryl, thank you
Yes.
so much for all of everything that you shared, because these are the types of conversations that I think really make a difference, especially for women, like we said, in a very male dominated industry like the automotive industry. So any final words that you want to share, Cheryl?
Yeah, just one. My word of the year, and I encourage everyone to have a word of the year, is roar. So the R is return to self. The O is oxygen, for like moving my body and getting oxygen every day, because we have to take care of ourselves. The A is ask boldly for what you need, advocate for
Yes.
yourself. And then the last R is receive. Women we're
Mm.
horrible receivers. So that is mine. I spent a lot of time on it. So I would just encourage everyone to think about, what is it you want in this new year? Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? And really lean into that. And I love your implementation labs, because you're right. It's so much going on. We've got to create that space for us to work, and working together and being among community is huge. And, I guess that's the final thing I'll say. If you don't feel supported, you need to find new people. Surround yourself with people who support you and see you for what your potential really is.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Cheryl, for all your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Rosie.
So before you go, there are two takeaways from my conversation with Cheryl. And I think the first one for me hit really hard. It is the story where Cheryl's boss told her that she was doing a lot of busy work. And when her performance review time came around, she was really disappointed because she didn't get a great review that she was expecting. And her boss told her that she was working on things that he did not care about. Sit with that. Working hard is not the same as working on what matters to the people who are deciding your future. And so I want you to really think that your results do not speak for you. You need to translate those results. And that is why I have created the articulation gap. And closing that gap is exactly why I created this framework for workplace communication and leadership visibility, especially if you're a high-performing woman that feels like you are stuck or overlooked. The second one, and this is no surprise to anybody, is AI. Cheryl called it the single biggest career differentiator we have in this decade. And I was just listening to another podcast that was saying that AI is getting 16 times smarter every day. And they said in a year, it's going to be 1,000,000 times smarter. So if you have not started looking at your career through the eyes of AI, then you are going to be left behind. Right now, it is time for you to be adaptable and integrate AI into your day-to-day. And so Cheryl's contact information is going to be in the show notes, so please go ahead and connect with her on LinkedIn. And if for whatever reason you don't know where to start by getting my free Impact Clarity tool. I'm going to link that in the show notes, and this way you can start turning your day-to-day work into the impact that you are already creating so that the leadership can see that impact and recognize it and reward you. So with that, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.